Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast live here on Friday, May the 16th. I am your host, JT Ruhnke, writer and reporter here at the 440 Sports Podcast Network. You can follow me on Twitter at JT_Ruhnke. Once again, back on a stormy, it looks like apparently we're getting storms today here in Nashville, but a stormy Hot Read Happy Hour Friday. Stoney, how are you, my friend? I know you have had quite the busy day today, talking on the radio with Cortland Finnegan of all people. But how are you?
I am exhausted, JT. But since it is a Hot Read Happy Hour, we gotta hold on. Let's set the mood right.
I love it. You even got a little of the fizz in there too. I like it.
Yeah, we're doing some ASMR here live on the Hot Read Podcast today. But yeah, I am exhausted. This is actually my 11th podcast this week. On top of getting up at 4 a.m. to go to the 104.5 The Zone studios and do Ramon and Will, which today was actually Ramon and Zach and Stoney and Cortland Finnegan. So it was a great time. Cortland is awesome, man. Just a pro's pro. Was so cool to get to talk to him and to see him get his flowers too. We had several callers that called in talking about how much he meant to them as Titans fans, and it was really cool to be able to sit next to him for all of that. So if you will go check that out. I don't know if I'm allowed to promote other things on the show, but here we are. It's Hot Read Happy Hour. All bets are off. No holds barred.
Yeah, no, I could not care less. You know, it's all about supporting good other local media here. And seeing you do that today was pretty awesome. Go check that out if you have not yet. Reminder, if you are joining us live on Twitter or Facebook and want to get in on the conversation like Daniel and Eddie and Jacob here today, good to see all of you guys here. Reminder, you can do so by going over to the 440 Sports YouTube channel and get into the comments section there. Daniel Caribbean saying sunny and 102 degrees here in the Caribbean today. I guess his name precedes him. He is Daniel and he is in the Caribbean. Eddie says, good evening, lads. And Jacob says, we can fin again. We'll talk about the Titans schedule, what our thoughts are. Stoney has a game-by-game breakdown of what the Titans are facing this upcoming season, along with the idea that no primetime games, this narrative of you don't draft your way into primetime, you play your way, why I think that is a little silly, given the context of some of the primetime games this season, along with some other tidbits here. And also, yes, Brock Purdy just got a new deal, so we'll break down that and so much more. Also, the Mets are playing the Yankees tonight in the first game of the Subway Series. So
I hear that's a big deal.
It is a big deal, which is why I decided to put on my Mets garb here on the show today. Ed Henry says he will check it out if you stop the Rudy hate. I heard that was also going on this morning as well.
Man, I got dragged. I was taking no prisoners this morning. I was coming after Rudy, Hocus Pocus, Elf, Blade, all of them. At one point, Zach and Ramon's wives actually texted them and said, get him off the show.
Oh, that is quite funny here. At least on Rudy, I agree with you. I think it's terrible. Okay. I'll be there with you. Kenneth saying schedule is out. Do the win-loss prediction, cowards. We will not be doing that. Eddie saying praying for a Yankee sweep. Need the Braves to catch up. Eddie, you can just leave right now. Just kidding. You can stay. You're all right. Yeah, excited to get into all of this today. But before we do, one more housekeeping note. Have to give a shout out to our sponsors, Sinkers Beverages and ML Rose, our presenting sponsor. Locations all across the greater Nashville area in Capitol View, Franklin, Gallatin, Melrose 8th Avenue, Mount Juliet, Sylvan Park, and coming soon to Inglewood in East Nashville. Simply the best selection of craft beer and burgers in the city. More on them later. Zedian says, Knicks or Celtics tonight? Well, I don't know if you've been paying attention, but the Knicks and the Mets, when one of them loses this series, the other one loses, and one of them wins a game this series, the other one wins. So I'm praying for a Knicks win, which means that the Mets will also win. Zedine says, or Ed Henry says, the Celtics shall not be mentioned in this chat. All right, let's get into the Tennessee Titans 2025 schedule. I do want to say first, we did also just get a little bit of an announcement as well that, the TBDs on the preseason games for the Tampa Bay Bucks and the Atlanta Falcons games have finally come out. It looks like they will be playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Saturday, August 9th at 6:30. And then the next week, they will be playing the Atlanta Falcons on Friday, August 15th at 6 p.m., in which Paul Kaharski also just reported that they have said, the Titans have said they plan for joint practices with both teams. So I think when you look at it, you'll get some good matchups there with the Tampa Bay Bucks defense and the newly, I guess, redrafted, reshaken up Atlanta team that finally has two big edge rushers on that front.
Yeah.
See Jalen Walker, get to see James Pierce. Those are going to be a lot of fun, along with some good wide receiver matchups there as well for the secondary to take on with Tampa Bay and Atlanta. Jacob Sane says 3 preseason games. That's right, people. You didn't get any prime time in the regular season. That's because you got all of your prime time in the preseason right there. So soak them up. Like Coach Will says, joint practices should be fun. Well, we can bring up the schedule here. I do have it, and we can look at it all together. Here is the official schedule. Obviously, it was reported earlier this week before the schedule is dropped. They start out in Denver against the Broncos on September 7th, and then come back for their home opener in Week 14. I think one of the biggest things to note here, right, is that we have 5 late window games, which about you, I'm a big fan of the late window games. I like, to be, obviously there are more games in the 1 o'clock window every single week. So, as someone who likes to watch all NFL, really, you get my fix in as much as I can, right? Being able to just watch that kind of slate before preparing for Titans coverage and things like that, sounds like a really fun time for me, and being able to do that. I think also for the crowd that's like, this team doesn't get a lot of exposure, I think this is the opportunity for them to get that exposure, right? When you're in that late window, there's not that many games going. You don't have as many games to watch as you do in the 1 o'clock. There's always, maybe 3 or 4 games instead of the other 7 or so games that you have going on there. So especially, against the Broncos in Week 1 is a great opportunity for people to change the narrative on the Tennessee Titans. And then later in the season against the 49ers, against the Raiders. And then, of course, this was the weirdest one, though. I'm not mad, but the game at Indianapolis is a 3:25 game. I thought that was
weird.
A little weird, but hey, I'll take it, right? Divisional game in the late window. I think for me, Stoney, I think that's really cool. I think it's a win for Titans in terms of exposure. But as me personally, I like watching them later in the day.
Yeah, I think if I didn't have work to do, I would probably enjoy the afternoon games a lot more than I do. But going from 3 to 6 right into the Sunday night football window, and then trying to get an article written, try to get my notes done for the week, and not getting wrapped up on that until late, and then trying to cram in dinner. I personally still like the noon games because the game's over at 3. My article is usually written by 4. I can go out to have early dinner with my wife, and then we can come back for Sunday night football, prop our feet up a little bit, and relax. And the late window games do kind of mesh with that. They kind of clash with that vibe a little bit. So I'm a little lower on the 3 p.m. window than you are, and the chat is too. The chat is all for the 3 p.m. window today. But I do think that it is sort of a consolation prize. No primetime games, but at least you have plenty of games in this window where there aren't a lot of other games going on. So you're probably going to get a little more eyeballs on you than you would in the noon window.
Yeah, I think that is fair. As Daniel says, hashtag sports reporter problems. They're
I know.
specifically, Jacob is on your side saying he loves a good nooner.
Who doesn't?
That game, but as Eddie says here, being able to wake up hungover at noon and not missing the games is going to be great. 3 p.m. window, baby. Daniel saying love the late games, can go to the beach all day. Daniel
Caribbean, living life, man.
Yeah, he can go to the beach all day and then come home and watch the Titans. Okay, man,
love it.
You save some happiness for the rest of us here. I'm more on the side of Eddie being able to do that if I'm not traveling for those. Coach Will says 4 p.m. games are going to be lit. We have to own that Titan slot, and with Cam, I think that's the opportunity that you're going to get this year. To be able to do that. And then Ed Henry says, I always love getting a real good team week one. Week one is a liar, and bad teams win a lot in the first week. So I think that is going to be really interesting. The rest of the schedule here as well, right? There is early in the season, they're doing a lot of traveling. You start the game, like 3 of your 5 late window games come in the first 6 weeks, which I think is not nothing. Like that is probably good to get them over with earlier in the season than later. Obviously, you're going to Denver. The Rams have to come play here, which is an advantage. You have your 2 divisional games after that against the Colts, and then at the Texans, and then you're out west for the Arizona Cardinals and the Las Vegas Raiders in back-to-back weeks, which I think Paul Kaharski reported that the Titans currently don't have plans to stay out there. So it sounds like that is a factor. And then everybody's favorite game to talk about, which we'll dive into here a little bit. Week 7, the Titans playing Mike Vrabel and the Patriots at home. Then after that, you have the Colts, the second Colts game on the schedule, playing the Chargers and the bye. Texans, Seahawks, Jags, 3 games straight at home. Then a trip against the Browns. The final 4 p.m. or I guess 3 p.m. window game for the Titans is against the San Francisco 49ers in week 15. And then you play the Chiefs at home, the Saints at home, and then, of course, everyone's favorite, that divisional TBD game that always happens in week 18 is is a good old favorite, a time classic, a time-honored tradition for the Titans, never knowing where that final game is going to be. Now, I will say just some things about this schedule as well. The rematches for the Titans. Obviously, last year, there were some, 3-week turnarounds where they played correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was the Texans, right? That they played 3 weeks in a 3-week span. They go into Houston and upset the Texans, had a game in between, and then the Texans come here and beat the Titans. So none of those on the schedule here, as the Colts games are 5 weeks apart. The Texans games are 7 weeks apart, and the Jags games are also 5 weeks apart. So, at least no quick turnarounds there for those types of games, which I think is good for game planning, right? Because those divisional games are always so different, in terms of preparation. And I know that's like, we're so far out to be talking about those, but those are the type of things that when you look at a schedule, it's like, these are all things that go into it where I think you look at the schedule and you say, this is a pretty good schedule for the Titans, right? You look at based on opponents' win-loss percentage, the easiest NFL schedules, the Titans come in number 4 with the 4th easiest schedule with a opponent win-loss percentage of 0.450. Only the Patriots, Saints, and 49ers are ahead of them. And then they're in the mix there with the Cardinals, Panthers, and Jets. Obviously, the 49ers being the easiest feels like just kind of being able to bounce back. And then, of course, to round out the list, just a quick aside here, the Buffalo Bills have the 10th easiest schedule, which I feel is just not fair. Yeah. And then, of course, the stretch, which I think everyone is going to talk about, where maybe if the Titans are looking for some mid-season rhythm, the home stretch of the Chargers, bye, Texans, Seattle, Jags at home with that bye in here. Like that to me is a huge gift and is worth more than any rest differential or anything can possibly be. Like getting those like 5 weeks to just stay home, regardless of what the schedule may or the record may be before those games, I feel like is another plus for this team.
Yeah, I think it shapes up really interestingly too, and I don't know if this is a thing that is exclusive to the Titans or if this was a league wide kind of mission, but there's not as many divisional games on the back end of this schedule. Usually, you see like the month of December, they want to save those divisional games to sort of manufacture the divisional race down the stretch, and that's not the case for the Titans, at least here. You know, their final 6 games, 2 of those are against the Jags, but that's it. And then you mentioned the homestand there. They don't have to go on the road for the entire month of November. I can't recall the last time that's happened, and that is going to be nice by the time you think by the time this offense really gets its feet beneath it, the offensive line starts to gel, Cam Ward's a little more comfortable, then you got all these home games, the schedule gets a little bit lighter. I think the Chargers are going to smoke the Titans this year. I think the Chargers are going to be pretty good, but I think you look at games against the Texans after the bye, the Seahawks, the Jags, the Browns, those are all winnable games. I was feeling a little frisky on football and other F words last night when I said this. I don't know that the 49ers are going to be the 49ers team that we've become accustomed to seeing in recent years. I feel like personnel issues are starting to catch up with San Francisco a little bit. It's not to say that the Titans are going to win this game outright or they might be feisty or competitive. I just don't think that game should scare Titans fans as much as it would have last year, the year before, so on and so forth. That Chiefs game is really the only one after the bye week that looks really daunting to me. And so you think if this offense, this rookie quarterback can sort of weather the storm of the good defensive lines early on in this season, because those first 4 games is like, man, good pass rush, good defensive line, good pass rush, good defensive line. It's overwhelming. I think it is a good trial by fire for Cam Ward. But man, if you can weather that storm without going 0-4, and then you pick up another of the couple, the Cardinals, the Raiders, the Patriots, the Colts again, and it could really set up nicely for this team to make its homestand in November, play teams that look on paper right now. This is all subject to change, of course, once the season starts, but
yes,
playing the lesser teams later on in the season it could be a formula for a surprise sort of season from the Titans. I think, whether you like the Primetime deal or not, I think this schedule shapes up pretty nicely. I think this is something that fans should be pretty excited about.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And Cristoforo says a lot of winnable games on this schedule. I think, the games that certainly we'll talk about this here in a second, but the brutal first 2 games for the Titans and Cam Ward's first action. I really think that's going to be a challenge for this team, regardless of how prepared they will be. As well as Kenneth saying, feels weird to say the first month will shape their season. I think it will shape it more so, like you said, it is a trial by fire for Cam, but also for this new offensive line, Dan Moore and the likes, seeing how fast they can gel, how fast they can get together and give Cam the opportunity to potentially upset these guys. Now, here's the thing I will say, right? Also here, Ed Henry saying they have a chance with Seahawks, Kansas City, and the 49ers to get flexed if they play well. Yeah, I mean, once again, the primetime situation is not, it's not over. Like we saw I believe the Bengals and Commanders game get flexed last year. Like that was not a primetime game to begin the season. Obviously, Jaden Daniels got flexed into primetime there because of how well they were playing. So those types of things can happen. And I do agree that, you look at those type of games, the Seahawks, the Chiefs, the 49ers, I could definitely see those being flexed. However, I do think that you talk about that first month, in not even the first month, but the first 6 weeks of the season are such an interesting one to me, because on paper, getting the Mike Vrabel game in week 7, I think, is a plus for the Titans. I said this when the schedule initially came out. My gut reaction was it's about as good of a spot for the Titans to get Vrabel's return as possible. It doesn't kind of set the precedent at the beginning of the season if it were like the home opener or the second game, right? Like those it doesn't damper the beginning of the season, doesn't create that storm of talking points. And it's not late enough in the season, and this is the big contending point there. It's not late enough in the season for it to be a reason that this staff gets canned by Amy Adams-Strunk. I think it comes in week 7, where even if, let's say, like worst case scenario, they're 1-5 going into that game. Like, does a 1-6 loss to Mike Vrabel accelerate Amy Adams-Strunk in that way? I tend to think it doesn't.
I don't think so either, not at that spot, but I think you're right. I think the later into the season that game goes, the more likely it is that if the result is not ideal, it means people are getting canned. Now, we've heard them say all the right things, that like, oh, they don't want this organization to be like that they're really committed to this front office, this coaching staff, really giving them patience, time, and all that. But this is the NFL, man. And lest we forget, John Robinson and Mike Vrabel signed contract extensions right before John Robinson was canned that season.
Yep.
So it's nice in theory, and I do hope that this front office and this coaching staff gets a little patience to see this thing through. But a bad result, a catastrophically bad result to an opponent that you might have a little bit of bad blood with, that to me is, man, coming in late November and December, I don't know. My spidey sense would be tingling that somebody's going to get the axe.
Simply put, like, if there's one game on the schedule they have to win no matter what, it's October 19th. That date should be circled for everyone in the front office. You have, like, if you win that game, then there's no problem, right?
Yeah, sure.
Even if they come in at 2-4 or 1-5 and they win that game, I think that puts Amy Adams-Strunk's worries away. I will say, there's no bigger conversation to be had than, like I said in my tweet, like, this is a good spot for the Vrabel game to come, as long as they're not 0-6 going into an 0-7 like loss. Like, that's the one where I could see like they're 0-6, they go in to this game, Mike Vrabel beats them, and they're 0-7. The axe is like premeditatedly being swung.
Yeah, if this team is 0-6, oh boy, that's going to be rough, because there are a handful of winnable games in that start. And I as much as I think patience is probably the way here, I do think that if they don't start winning some games and looking competitive, I think it's going to rapidly accelerate the temperature on Brian Callahan's seat.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you there. Let's get to some of your questions here. Reminder, if you're joining us on Twitter or Facebook and want to join the conversation, head on over to the 440 Sports YouTube channel, where you can give us your thoughts on the schedule here. Timothy Bennett saying Vegas giving Pats 8.5 over under on wins. Will they actually be that good? I think that feels like a Vrabel buff to me, based on where they were last year. However, I mean, their offensive line does improve. I like Drake May a lot. They got Drake May some weapons like Kyle Williams. I couldn't be more excited and hyped for a guy like Kyle Williams, especially with Drake May in that offense. They have a new running back in Travion Henderson. Like, that team is getting better, but
Don't forget all the old Titans, the Harold Landry, the Robert
Harold
Spillane,
Landry, Jack Gibbons.
Jack Gibbons. Yeah, of course.
I mean, that is going to be a revenge game to end all revenge games on that one there. Don't even worry about Mike Vrabel, but the Jack Gibbons return to Nissan Stadium will be studied for generations.
It will be.
Jacob saying Amy Adams Strunk knows the reputation she is getting and wants to be seen as more methodical. I would hope so. Like to me, just put Amy Adams Strunk in the give Amy Adams Strunk the Men in Black like snap thing, the thing, and just forget that game whatsoever in week 7.
From what I've heard, the rumor and innuendo on the street, Jacob's right in that statement.
Yes, I agree. Cristoforo says, with no significant setbacks, the schedule is manageable to secure at least 7 wins, which is the minimum requirement. I would say so. Like 7 feels right for like a productive season, especially if you're following what the Bengals did with Brian Callahan there. Like obviously they had more success than 7. They went all the way and lost, but I do think that if you're looking for an improvement and seeing that this is working, 7 is probably that threshold there. Daniel also saying no clue if the Pats are going to be any good. Derek saying Vrabel sucks.
No love lost.
Zedine says it seems like Amy has taken a hands-off approach lately. Hopefully it stays that way. And I think it will until October 19th. Like there's no 19th. Like, right. Like you can take it the hands-off approach as long as you want, but you're not going to like, I promise you, she will be there front and center for that game. Cristoforo saying, honestly, primetime games sometimes give unneeded pressure, and for the worst team from last year, makes sense. We'll get into that here in a second. Timothy Bennett saying, if you understand playoffs are not realistic in 2025, you look at the first 2 games to maximize the learning experience and use them to improve. I agree there.
Could not agree more. That is a great take, Timothy. I think you want the trial by fire for the rookie quarterback there, the guy that has the reputation for kind of being ice cold to begin with. Like I'm here for it. I'm stoked for these first 2 games.
Yeah, I am too. Those are going to be really, really fun. Eddie saying Pat's easy win. Hashtag Vrabel rookie curse. It's now on the opposite side, on the other shoe there. But Jacob also saying, I wonder how many quarterbacks we'll face in those 6 divisional games, given the Colts quarterback questions and the Texans O-line. Certainly is going to be interesting. And then Uncle Drew with a shout out for Stoney saying, Stoney, great hearing you on the morning show today. Kicked ass, brother.
Thank you, Uncle Drew. I appreciate your support, my man.
Yeah. And so I do agree that the first 2 games are big tests for the Titans. Like that is the quintessential type of playoff caliber talent, regardless of week 1 overreactions. You're going to get a version of a team that is better than yours, no matter what, in the Denver Broncos, from the offensive side to the head coaching experience that team has to the defensive side, which is retooled and looks better than they did even last year with that secondary. It's going to be a challenge for Cam. And then building on top of that with a home opener against LA, another defense that just is insane. And then 2 divisional games after that. It is a huge first month and a huge test for Cam Ward. And I know you had some thoughts, not even just on that first month, but on the entire schedule, previewing like what is the biggest thing that the Titans are going to have to face in terms of adversity in all these games. Let's start with that first month. Your thoughts on those 4 games and how big of a challenge it may be for the Titans.
So first things first, I think it is, you mentioned this earlier, the offensive line getting right. Man, there's no breaks, because this Broncos team may not be the most vaunted in terms of name value. You might not know a lot of these guys, but they have some horses in the stable there. And with Vance Joseph serving as defensive coordinator, he's going to blitz, he's going to pressure. It's going to be coming from every which way. You're going to be having to track who's coming, who's dropping, that sort of thing. And then rebuilding that secondary the way that they have, the way I phrased it was, Denver is approaching the secondary the way the Philadelphia Eagles approach their defensive line rotation. Like They add Hufanga from the 49ers. They draft Jahdae Barron. This is like a group that is 5 deep with reliable starters when you consider the defensive player of the year, Pat Surtain second, Riley Moss, an underrated cornerback, and then Brandon Jones at safety, who had his most productive season as a pro last year with the Broncos. Like, this is going to be a test for the offensive line, and it's going to be a test for Cam Ward and his ability to read coverages and to find the right matchup against that secondary. That's what worries me about that matchup specifically. But then you look at the offensive line going up against the Rams defensive front. That is a talented young core. Like, if they can keep those guys intact in Los Angeles, the Rams are going to have one of the best defensive fronts in football for the next 8 years or something like that. I think the Colts defensive line doesn't have the youth that the Rams have, but it's predicated on power. They've got some good names there. I'm not the biggest Leatu Latu fan, but I recognize that he did improve over the course of his rookie season. The Texans have a pretty good defensive front there as well. This is going to be, that first month is going to be tough for Cam Ward, just adjusting to the speed of the NFL, reading defenses, and kind of, you want to get a look at Cam Ward in a muddy pocket. Brother, he's going to have a muddy pocket the first month of the season. It's also a test for this offensive line. How quickly can they gel, come together against a barrage of quality defensive fronts that they're going to be facing?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you there. Uncle Drew also saying with the small tweaks Cam needs with the under center dropbacks, I could see Callie putting him in the gun a good bit to start off, being Cam is more comfortable in the gun. Daniel also saying, I hope Cam plays plenty in the preseason. I would expect him to, at least in the first 2 games. The third game is always weird, but, you never know. But that's too early. But I would say that's almost a must for them. Christopher saying the first month of the schedule really brings out the league's welcoming party for Cam. And then you get to, like you said, a first month of unrelenting defenses for this Titans offensive line and Cam to face. And then I think you pull back on the brakes just a little bit against a team like the Arizona Cardinals, who don't have as good of a front four or a defense like the first 4. The Raiders, Max Crosby, you can never count him out. It's going to be a really interesting matchup now. Max Crosby on JC Latham now this time, I think is going to be really interesting. Geno Smith, that's going to be you talk about a flip right here, right? For the Cardinals and the Raiders. The first 4 games of the season really are a test for the offense. Cardinals and Raiders, you flip that script. Like, those 2 teams have some playmaking guys in terms of the Cardinals with Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr., the Raiders now with Geno Smith, Ashton Genty, Brock Bowers, Jacoby Myers. Like, that's going to be a big time challenge for the defense. And then, of course, you get the Patriots and the Colts yet again before you start that real nice sweet spot of the schedule, which is the 5-week home stretch.
Yeah, and specifically in those games against the Cardinals and the Raiders, I'm looking at linebacker and safety for the Titans, because those are two positions that are, there are some question marks about those. And I think Amani Hooker and Xavier Woods, if they stay healthy, they're going to be quite an improved tandem compared to what the Titans had last season, obviously due to injury, but nonetheless due for an upgrade. And then at the linebacker spot, man, both of these teams have tight ends that can be matchup problems.
Totally forgot about Trey McBride. Yeah.
That they require attention. So with the Cardinals, Trey McBride, I know he doesn't have the eye-popping stats, and people kind of raised their eyebrows when he got that big contract extension. But this is a guy that can really move the chains if you don't keep him in check. He can rack up catches, and he can make you pay. And then you go to the Raiders, where Brock Bowers looks like he is, just first in line for that next generation of best tight end in the league. I mean, he is off to a hot start for his career, and they have Michael Mayer behind him, who, ain't exactly chopped liver. I think those 2 games are going to be a big test for these linebackers and safeties as they're trying on defense to kind of figure out what that room looks like, so to speak. And then with the Patriots, I think, man, Carlton Davis isn't what he used to be, but the Pats add him to pair with Christian Gonzalez, who is, I think, one of the more underrated players in the league. Very, very good cornerback. I think then it flips to back to the offense where we've got to see this Titans wide receiving core that is going to have to sort itself out in real time in its own right. They're going to have to figure out how to get open against these Patriots defensive backs. So it kind of changes up a little bit because of the matchups. But I would say in this stretch that we're talking now, linebackers and safeties against the Cardinals and Raiders, and the wide receivers against the Patriots defensive backs.
Yeah, Eddie's saying, just Bowers is just so good, and it's going to be a massive challenge for the Titans. Much like that season, not last year, but the year before when we were talking about guys like Trey Avery and the likes trying to cover Tyreek Hill in that Monday night game where Will Levis had his infamous comeback. Feels like the same, that when you look at the schedule, Brock Bowers against those linebackers, Cody Barton and the like. It's gonna be scary. It's gonna be really scary, and I'm not sure how much they can really stack up there. Jake Robinson says, "What week does Winston usurp Woods in the starting lineup here?" Listen. I don't think he usurps him, but you talk about Trey McBride, Dalton Schultz. Even with the Colts, Tyler Warren now in that lineup, like there's no question that he is going to get a lot of reps, maybe not starting reps, but reps nonetheless against some of these tight ends if he is healthy enough to play. So I think that's a big one. But yeah, like you said, that is an extremely tough break for the Titans linebackers and safeties starting in week 3 going through week 8. Tyler Warren, Dalton Schultz, Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, Hunter Henry, and Johnny Smith. I think Johnny Smith still plays for did he sign with them? I don't know. But Hunter Henry, nonetheless, and then Tyler Warren again there in those weeks is a massive, massive challenge for this defense.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then if we get into the Chargers game, I mean, man, they have quietly built a really good roster out in LA, but this running back group is just, it's stupid. I mean, Najee Harris, Amarian Hampton, Hassan Haskins, and let's not forget, they still have Kamani Vidal there as well. No secret what Jim Harbaugh wants to do. And I think they'll be improved, but this is a unit that was a little leaky in the run defense department as the season wore on last year. If they don't get that right, it could be a long afternoon with the Chargers just punishing the Titans front.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. And that is the first game in their I would say, soft spot of the schedule. Not necessarily easy, but being able to stay at home for 5 weeks in a row because they go into their bye. Another game at home against the Texans. Then you have a Seahawks team, which not really sure what they project to be, but Sam Darnold, Cooper Kupp, JSN, those are some tough guys to play against. An all well-rounded offensive core around the question mark that is Sam Darnold, Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, with a pretty tough defense as well. We saw them go toe-to-toe with a lot of those guys last season in the joint practices in the preseason. And then the Titans get their first look at Travis Hunter all the way in very late into the season, November 30th. And at that point, I think we could be talking about Travis Hunter in a totally different way than we are now, right? Like, I think this is a season of find out what he really is for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And maybe we know more of what Travis Hunter is by that time.
Yeah, sure. I think, the plan is, from what we've heard, is that they want to play him at wide receiver with some packages at cornerback. At this point in the season, I think we'll probably have a decent sense of whether or not that's actually going to work. Like, by the time they play the Titans, it may be a situation where they're like, man, you can't be out here playing all these snaps, or or something like that. So you may only have to worry about him on one side of the ball. The issue is, I think that one side of the ball will be at wide receiver, and I think the combination of him and Brian Thomas Jr., who I think is going to be a stud. I think he's a really good player. That combination is going to be tough for a Titans secondary, well, specifically the cornerbacks, that aren't really known for their like turn and run speed. They're physical guys that like to punch you, disrupt your timing at the line of scrimmage. I get that. That can impact how you get downfield, that sort of thing. But Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas Jr., that's a pair of receivers that can really get your corners kind of turned around and chasing. And I don't think that's an advantageous position for them to be in. That, to me, is going to be one of the toughest matchups about the facing the Jags this season. As for the Seahawks, man, I think they've got an underrated defensive front. I think this is going to be another big offensive line game where if these guys are firing on all cylinders, if things are clicking for them, they can get this done. But that front seven is going to be sneaky good this year, I think, for Seattle. You talk about Jaron Reed and Leonard Williams, counting on a breakout season from Byron Murphy. And then at linebacker, DeMarcus Lawrence, Boye Mafe, that's where Ernest Jones IV landed, was inevitably in Seattle. And then the upstart Tyrese Knight as well. They've got a rotation of guys that can make running the ball and getting the ball out on time an issue. And I think that could be a critical matchup, that if the Titans offensive line can push those guys around a little bit, it'll make things a lot easier on them.
Yeah, Easy says what is crazy is Darnold actually looks like a Seahawk, or at least he looks like the Sam the Eagle from the Muppets, which I think is very, very funny. Christopher saying, not going to lie, I love the week 10 bye. Certainly from last year where it was week 5 or so when their bye was, I hated it. Yeah. I hated that. So a later in the season bye is a lot of fun there. Uncle Drew saying the group of tight ends will face in that stretch already looks like 15 to 25 beers from him. Timothy saying Winston versus the Chargers run game. Give me all that. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be a good test for this defense that still has a lot of things to prove on that side, from the edge to the cornerback to the linebacker position. Easy saying also Seahawks are fringe middle of the pack team, can see them starting off decent, but Darnold collapsing late in the season. It's going to be a test for both of these teams to, a good taste of what Titans fans may have wanted this offseason with Sam Darnold at one point.
Fair enough.
Before the psych ward took over everybody's brains, apparently, on Twitter. Timothy saying, if I were the Jags, I'd say pedal to the metal and see if they can play Hunter full-time both sides, adjust 4 or 5 games in if you have to. I think that's what Travis Hunter would want to do. Not necessarily. Sure. I don't know if the Jags will honor that request like he so very much demanded at the NFL Combine when we met with him, but it will be interesting. And then you get to the final stretch of the season here. Cleveland, in whatever dumpster fire awaits. I mean, the last time the Titans played in Cleveland, it was one of the most embarrassing games for the Titans ever. Myles Garrett is still Myles Garrett, and so that will be quite interesting to see him go up against J.C. Latham and or Dan Moore, which Dan Moore reunion. If we remember when we first talked about the Titans signing him and the stats when Dan Moore goes against Myles Garrett versus everyone else, not pretty. And then San Francisco, not really sure what they're going to be. Kansas City, you obviously don't need to be reminded of who they are, but it is Mike Borgonzi's revenge game.
There we go. Now we're talking.
New Orleans Saints, a lot of question marks in the back half here. And then, of course, you end the season with Jacksonville. Cleveland, San Francisco, and Saints. Cleveland, I think the main question there is, like, will it be Shadur versus Cam? Don't know. Not
that
sure.
Would be fun.
What will that look like that late into the season? 49ers, does Brock Purdy stay healthy after the 49ers signed both NPF and Andre Dillard to their team? Is he still alive after that? And they sign him to a new contract. And then, of course, who wins out the quarterback battle? And do we see the other only possible rookie, I guess not the only other possible rookie matchup, but the only other most likely rookie matchup, Tyler Shuck versus Cam Ward in that game against the Saints. feels like the only other one that you could realistically see on this list is if somehow Anthony Richardson, Jason Bean, and Daniel Jones all die, and Riley Leonard is the quarterback for them in Week 8 on October 26th. I guess also it could be a Dylan Gabriel versus Cam Ward game. I forgot.
That's
Thank
true.
you, Daniel. I forgot. Yep.
Yeah, we can't forget that.
But that stretch, it feels like a mixed bag of like, I don't know what really is going to happen. It's way too early to tell what those teams, which I don't even know, much like the Titans, still trying to figure out what exactly is going on and what their identity is and things like that. Maybe the Titans, out of all these teams, are ahead of the curve in front of the 49ers, the Browns, and the Saints, but still nonetheless teams that, like the Titans, two of them, the Browns and the Saints, are in the same boat. No primetime games, have a lot to prove in the league.
Yeah. And I think there are a couple of really interesting coaching matchups here where you look at the Browns game, and I mean, yeah, it's kind of easy to say Dan Moore Jr. versus Myles Garrett. How does he respond? How does he step up? Really, that offensive line as a whole, to that unit that added Mason Graham, who I think is a good player in the draft.
Yeah,
but too. That defense has talent at every position. Jim Schwartz is doing a fantastic job with that unit. That was not the reason they lost so many games last year by any stretch of the imagination. So with a rookie quarterback going up against one of the best edge rushers in the NFL, if not the best edge rusher in the NFL, for my money, I think he probably is. How do Brian Callahan and Nick Holtz game plan and approach attacking this defense with your rookie quarterback and maybe a roster and offense that is still trying to come together, that they're still trying to rebuild? I think that is the key question when it comes down to that matchup on paper, as things stand here in May, obviously. But then I look at the 49ers game, and I mentioned earlier, like the slightest little slip in personnel for the 49ers. Like, they're getting a little older. They've lost some pieces. Their defensive front looks a lot different. It looks a lot less intimidating than it did. I'm a fan of Michael Williams. Don't get me wrong, powerful rusher, but man, counting on him to be your regular starter opposite Nick Bosa is asking a lot from him. And losing Dre Greenlaw is a huge loss. Hufanga, a huge loss. This team has lost some talent, but the thing has been, historically, Kyle Shanahan always has his team competitive. Really good offensive coach. So on the flip side of that, how does Denard Wilson game plan for that chess match against Kyle Shanahan? To me, that's going to be one that's interesting to watch there. In the Chiefs, it's similar to what I said about the Jags. Like, the Chiefs have a ton of speed at wide receiver. So how do the defensive backs hold up to that? Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown. They drafted Jalen Royals. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but they added Tyquan Thornton, who none of us are even sure if he can even play football, but the man is blazing fast. So they, like, literally all they want is they just want speed. So I think that's going to be a potential issue with the secondary. I did ask, though, when I was jotting down, looking at the Chiefs roster, if I'm the Titans, maybe I'm just going at Christian Fulton for the entire game. Though,
yep.
At that point in the season,
Is he
Williams
going to be there?
Might have unseated him. Have unseated Christian Fulton. So then we get to the Saints, and boy, it is going to be tough to stop Tyler Shuck when he gets his feet beneath him come December. Just going to completely take off and take the league by storm. No, I think that the Saints do have on paper an improved offensive line group. Talisi Fuanga, fantastic left tackle. They're set there. Nick Saldiveri, a little shaky. He might lose his job to Dylan Radins on that side of the line. And then you've got Eric McCoy at center, Cesar Ruiz, the other guard spot. Right now, man, I don't know. The depth chart lists Trevor Penning at the top of it, but I think they're going to be starting Kelvin Banks by the time it's all said and done. That's a pretty decent unit. And so you think about this edge group that the Titans have that is, has a lot to prove on paper. that's going to be a big matchup in that game for them to see how those guys have come along by the time we get that late in the season.
Yeah. And so, great breakdown of what to expect this early on, Stoney there. To wrap it up, like, did the Titans, with no prime time, I think when you look at it, like, this is a schedule I expected for the Titans, right? I think they have a lot of challenges going out west, dealing with them, but I think it's good challenges for them, especially with where they are in the rebuild. And so when you look at this, I think there's a lot of winnable games, and I think there is a lot of opportunity for this team to improve this year. And I think it's going to be an exciting year of football, and very excited to see some of these teams go up against Cam Ward and Cam Ward go up against them. It's going to be a lot of fun. All right. Last thing we'll talk about today, the primetime thing.
Yeah.
To me, I understand it, right? I think the biggest thing that you point to, right? The last time a number 1 overall pick that was a quarterback did not get a primetime game in their first season was Cam Newton in 2011, and then subsequently the Lions in 2009. You can look at some of these teams realistically. You look at the Panthers, you look at the Lions back then, you look at the Titans, smaller market teams that were pretty much at the bottom of the barrel. Like, you could say that, what about Jaden Daniels? Well, I guess he doesn't count, but like, what about the Bears? What about the Cardinals? The Cardinals is probably the closest one, I would say, to this kind of situation, right? In a smaller market. But I think some of those guys did have things going for him. Kyler Murray, Heisman winner, a guy who had more accolades coming out of college than Cam Ward did. So that makes sense. The Bears, bigger market. Like, a lot of these teams, like the Bengals, Joe Burrow, national title winner. Like, a lot of narratives that also can go into the mix here when it comes to these number 1 overall quarterbacks in getting primetime games. Cam Ward doesn't exactly fit that bill, right? And so I think when you're looking at it, that is one piece of the puzzle. However, earlier this week, on the Ross Tucker podcast, Mike North, who is a VP of schedule planning and television planning for the NFL, was asked about why the Titans did not get any primetime games in their schedule. And so here's what he had to say. And I think it's a little interesting, and I think a little silly the way he goes about it. Here's what he had to say.
Wasn't intentional. I mean, you know how this works. We've got probably a dozen schedules in front of the commissioner in that last week. Some of those had the Titans on Monday Night Football. Some of them had the Titans in the TBD pool for Saturday for the NFL Network. It wasn't a conscious effort going in maximum 0 Titans primes. It was more about a mixture of all the rest of what has to go into the soup. You don't draft your way into prime time, you play your way into prime time. So
that last sentence, you don't draft your way into prime time, you play your way into prime time, I think is the one that I think is the most silly, because I get it. Like, you have to earn your spot. But then when you look at who got the most primetime games this upcoming season, Cowboys are the Cowboys. I'm going to admit them, even though they're bad, right? The Falcons and the Dolphins, 5 primetime games. What have the Falcons played their way into the past couple of seasons that really merit them having 5 games, right? Michael Penix's spotlight is because of how highly he got drafted.
Yeah.
Their team is now better this season because they drafted 2 first-round edge rushers to help with that team. I get that they have some exciting pieces around them, but a lot of these teams that did not get nearly as many primetime games had that, right? And so I think it is quite silly to say that, I understand it's a smaller market than maybe Atlanta. Miami is another situation as well. What have they done draft-wise? Is Tua playing his way into primetime a lot? I don't know. Tua could, for all we know, be in the same situation as we were last season, right? Where Tua is out in the middle of the season, and you have Zach Wilson on for 2 of these primetime games, right?
Yeah.
Like
Quinn Ewers.
Quinn Ewers for these games. So I think that philosophy, while I get the idea that you have to play your way, and I think the Titans, with where they are right now in their rebuild, still have not proved anything and have all the chances in the world early on this season to play their way into primetime via a flex, via the 425 the Denver game, the 425 Denver game, the I guess, late window, I should say. I'm getting my Eastern times mixed up, but the late window Broncos game, the late window Cardinals game, the late window Raiders game, like they have opportunity to put their face on the map with Cam Ward.
Sure.
But this idea that the Falcons have done anything but draft their way into a team that now without Kirk Cousins could look young and fun and exciting, it just makes no sense to me.
Yeah. And Derek just dropped a bar in the chat. We couldn't play our way into respect when we were winning, so that's a lie. It's a great point. I mean, even when the team was good, they weren't getting that many primetime looks. So like and again, I go back to, hey, I kind of like that I won't have to stay up till midnight writing an article this season. I'm good with skipping out on the primetime games altogether. But I do get why so many people are irritated by it. It does kind of feel like a slight, like disrespect, that sort of thing. And just be honest about it, man. Like we're Titans fans. We watched this team last year. We know what the deal is. You don't have to try and be snarky about it. Just say it. The Titans sucked. It's a small market team that offers little television ratings value. So just call it like it is. Call it is. It's a small market team that wasn't very good. And just be honest about it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that is fair. Derek says it works well for my work schedule. I'm just calling out the lying. Jason McDonald said the Pats played their way into 3 primetime games by winning one more game than the Titans, apparently. I will say, like, Paul Koharski also had this as well. For reference, when the Titans came off an 11-5 season in 2020, they were in primetime 3 times. In 2021, when they came off 12-5, they were in 5 primetime games in 2022. So, I mean, right? The simplest answer here is just win games and you'll probably be in primetime, right?
Okay.
But I think when you mix in the idea that they have Cam Ward and these types of things, and that the message from a vice president of broadcasting planning for the NFL says that the Titans didn't get a primetime game because you don't draft your way, is super silly. And it's not what they really think. And I think that is pretty silly.
Who is Mike North anyway?
I don't know. Yeah,
never heard Mike North's name before.
I have no idea either. But Paul also saying, good evening, lads. Titans games time at 4 a.m. for me, so a few primetime games would be grand. Appreciate you, Paul, for tuning in. I hope you're having a great evening. But yeah, I mean, that's just my piece. I think there is a little bit of hypocrisy when it comes to that idea that you don't draft your way into primetime games here. So Stoney, unless you have unless you have one more thing, I think we're wrapping up the Titans schedule here.
I'm lucky that we made it an hour without me collapsing. I didn't tell the story, but like I'm always up past midnight. Like my bedtime is like 12:15 to 12:30. I like to shut my laptop at midnight and then go like scroll a little bit, read a little bit to kind of unwind. Couldn't do that with the alarm set for 4 o'clock. So I tried to go to bed at 9 o'clock last night, and I just laid in bed staring at the ceiling saying, go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep. I finally fall asleep, and then I wake up at 1:30 in the morning because I had to pee. That's what happens when you get older, men. Pour one out, 1 foot in the grave. But I wake up, and I couldn't go back to sleep. So I'm running on a sleep window of about, I think it's probably like 10:30, 11 when I fell asleep to 1:30. So like maybe 2 or 3 hours of sleep and 4 hours of radio, a work day, and this podcast in between it. Like I'm on the verge of collapsing right now.
Well, Stoney, we appreciate you for being here, as well as appreciate all of you guys for tuning in. Sounds like you are headed for a nice, deserved Friday night off of rest and relaxation, hopefully, right?
I'm thinking date night at ML Rose is back if the thunderstorms don't take us.
Well, I love it, and that's a great way to end off the show. Thank you to ML Rose, our presenting sponsor. Once again, locations all across the greater Nashville area, including Capitol View, Franklin, Gallatin, Melrose, 8th Avenue, Mount Juliet, Sylvan Park, and coming soon to Inglewood. Stoney, you got to get out there. Last time when I went with my mom in May, they still did not have a burger of the month. So like we're halfway into May and people are wondering, where is the burger of the month? I've seen nothing. This is the Hot Read Podcast. ML Rose, if you're listening, where's the burger? Where's
the Borgonzi burger?
I know. Where is the Borgonzi burger? I have no idea. Stoney, you're going to have to keep doing that boots on the ground journalism for us and see if you can find anything out. But thank you to ML Rose. Go over there and enjoy one of their 25 beers on tap and their killer appetizers, the pretzel bites, the Nashville hot cheese curds, all of that good stuff. And then also, if you're in the mood, shop at Sinkers Beverages, a 4-time Best of Nashville liquor store of the year. Shop Sinkers at sinkersbeverages.com. Stoney, that is all. I think that's going to do it for the Hot Read Podcast today. Christopher was saying we need to sign a pension for the Borgonzi. I think he means petition for the Borgonzi burger. Great show. Great breaking down the Titan schedule as always. We will be back next week in some form or fashion to break down some more interesting things. I know I had an article about Xavier Restrepo on Stacking the Inbox that we didn't get to today that I want to get to. Maybe we'll do a mailbag episode as we kind of hit a lull period between rookie minicamp and OTAs. Be on the lookout for that. I am at JT_Ruhnke on Twitter. He is at Stoney Keeley on Twitter. And then, of course, the Hot Read Podcast page at Hot Read Pod. Until then, this has been the Hot Read Podcast. We will talk to you later. Have a good weekend, everybody.